There's a moment when the mind opens too wide. The familiar becomes alien. The symbolic becomes literal. And what once felt like thought begins to feel like fire. It's happened in fevered dreams, in psychotic breaks, in LSD trips, in studio apartments at 3 a.m. with nothing but a guitar and 100 voices in your head. Madness isn't just an illness. It's sometimes the aftershock of insight. A door kicked open, not gently turned. Aldous Huxley called it in The Doors of Perception. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is. Infinite. But those doors don't swing both ways easily. Some never come back. And yet, artists, mystics, philosophers, they keep going to that edge. Not because they want to be broken, but because something lives on the other side of reason, and they want to touch it. In 1889, Friedrich Nietzsche witnessed a horse being beaten in a Turin street. He threw his arms around the animal, sobbed uncontrollably, and then fell silent forever. The man who had written Thus Spoke Zarathustra and Beyond Good and Evil, works that question morality, God, and selfhood itself, had crossed an inner threshold. Scholars debate whether it was syphilis, bipolar disorder, or psychotic break. But what's more compelling is how close his philosophy had already come to psychological collapse. He asked the mind to deconstruct every illusion: God, truth, morality. And in doing so, disassembled the frame that holds coherence. His final letters are signed Dionysus and the Crucified. Not metaphors, but identities. He became myth because personhood had shattered. Quote, "He who fights with monsters," he warned, "should take care, lest he become a monster." Not all break on into the other side and fall into madness. Carl Jung descended into it voluntarily. Between 1913 and 1917, Jung experienced intense inner visions, dreams, and auditory hallucinations. He conversed with mythic figures: Philemon, Salome, the Red One, archetypal expressions of his unconscious. Rather than suppress them, he recorded them in his Red Book, blending calligraphy, theology, and psychedelic illustration. Wasn't necessarily therapy, more so a ritual, a modern katabasis, a descent into the underworld. Jung later said he never would have discovered the collective unconscious, shadow, or archetypes without his confrontation with madness. But here's the difference. He had tools: mythology, symbolic language. He didn't interpret the visions literally, he engaged them as metaphor. The experience of the numinous, Jung wrote, is the real therapy. Music has always been a frontier of consciousness, but rock and roll especially became a site of psychic rupture. Think of Syd Barrett, the founding visionary of Pink Floyd. A brilliant guitarist and lyricist, he helped birth psychedelic rock and then slipped into incoherence, likely triggered by a combination of LSD and latent schizophrenia. His lyrics had always flirted with the surreal. I am not here, I am not there, I disappear. And eventually, he did. Barrett became a ghost in his own band, and the song Shine On You Crazy Diamond became his eulogy. Or think of Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, who, at the height of his creative powers, locked himself in his bedroom for years. His Smile project was a descent into sonic madness, genius without gravity. He heard voices, he lost time, but he also wrote God Only Knows. Or Jim Morrison, called himself the Lizard King, believed in Dionysian chaos, spiritual breakdown, and the stripping of all false selves. And when he read Huxley's Doors of Perception, he named his band after it, because music, he believed, was an act of ritual unbinding. Expose yourself to your deepest fear, Morrison wrote. After that, fear has no power. They didn't go mad for the spectacle, they went mad chasing something that felt truer than logic. Huxley, Morrison, Barrett, Wilson, they weren't cautionary tales. They were emissaries from the threshold, translating the ineffable into chord, lyric, brushstroke. In psychology, there are clinical names for these states. Schizophrenia, a breakdown in the relation between thought, emotion, and reality. Bipolar I disorder, where manic insight collides with depressive paralysis. Dissociative states, where memory, identity, and perception disintegrate. But even within clinical structures, there's growing recognition that some breakdowns carry symbolic weight. Psychiatrist R.D. Laing believes psychosis could be a journey, not just an illness. A voyage through inner space, he called it. Insanity is a perfectly rational adjustment to an insane world. In many indigenous cultures, initiates who displayed extreme psychological distress were guided by elders, not sedated. These madness crises were seen as calls to deeper roles: healers, poets, prophets. The difference wasn't just medicine, it was context, community, and meaning. As Jung said, the unconscious speaks in images. And for these artists, the music was the image. The song was the message. We often ask, did the madness cause the art? Maybe it's better to ask, what happens when the mind becomes the art and no longer knows the difference? Today we romanticize madness in art, but fear it in life. And rightly so. Not everyone returns. Even Jung said, the line between genius and madness is a very narrow one. But still, the edge calls to us. Because on that edge, something real happens. The ego fractures, the roles drop. And for a moment, the self meets something vast, unnameable, and alive. Madness is not wisdom, but in the right conditions, with ritual, guidance, and grounding, it can become revelation. The doors of perception, the red book, the starry night, dark side of the moon. All these are expressions, not to the world as it is, but to the world as it feels when the mind steps outside itself. To push the mind too far is dangerous, but never pushing means living in someone else's version of reality. And maybe that's why madness calls to us. Not as a destination, but as a warning. That the soul is bigger than the ego. And the ego cannot hold it forever. These individuals, Nietzsche, Jung, Van Gogh, Morrison, they didn't seek madness, but they faced it. They risked their sanity to follow a truth the world wasn't ready to see. And maybe that's the paradox of being fully alive. That to see clearly, you sometimes must lose the lens. That to transform, you sometimes must fall apart. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung said. Not all madness is insight, but all insight requires a breaking of the ordinary. And in the shattered mirror, we glimpse something more real than reason ever allowed.